This is a scene from director Na Hong-Jin's 2016 South Korean horror thriller film, The Wailing. Our protagonist wakes up from this dream screaming. Now, there's something special about this dream. It has no clear beginning. Let's rewind a bit. This is the first time our main character, Jung-gu, wakes up screaming from a dream, a sequence that bears close resemblance to the common trope known as "it was all a dream." A technique often used in storytelling to reveal critical character information, to highlight inner thoughts and psychology. Over the years, however, this trope has garnered its fair share of criticism, especially within the horror genre. All too often, movies will explore intriguing ideas with unique and interesting sequences that flip the established narrative upside down, only for the focal character to suddenly wake up from what was actually a dream. The use of the trope in this way has been rightly criticized for feeling cheap. Done poorly, it can often shatter suspension of disbelief and reduce the audience's immersion in the story. But The Wailing is different. In fact, uniquely, there is no dream that precedes this scene. Or at least we're never shown the dream. Only our main character, Jung-gu, knows exactly what he was dreaming about. And so we're left with a question. What was the dream? One could argue that, logically, he was dreaming about the events of the preceding scene, in which he and his colleague talk about a terrifying local legend late at night in the police station, until they're interrupted by the presence of a mysterious woman standing outside in the pouring rain. Or better yet, maybe this scene was itself the dream. This single scene poses so many questions, and yet it answers none of them. It's this upon which resides the brilliance of The Wailing, a movie that builds not only its terrifying atmosphere and narrative, but also its themes upon one critical element: uncertainty. The film opens with a cautionary Bible verse, a warning that the audience should distrust and question anything they experience. We're then met with an opening shot of an unknown fisherman. The movie then transitions into the core of its narrative. A local cop in a small South Korean village, Jung-gu, wakes up one morning to a horrifying crime scene. A diseased man has inexplicably murdered his entire family in cold blood. Director Na Hong-Jin places key emphasis on a strange plant at the crime scene, and the police officers mention a mushroom, but the details of the film seem to suggest the culprit may be an epidemic, potentially of supernatural origin. But just as we begin to collect more details about the crime, the film switches gears and we're shown a man bathed in blood, eyes red, attacking a local hiker in the forest. We then cut to Jung-gu and his colleague in the police station, presumably talking about the events of the previous scene, until they're disrupted by the woman, and the film arrives at this scene. Here, the movie neither confirms nor denies the preceding scene as the dream from which Jung-gu awakes. In fact, nearly every scene leading up to Jung-gu waking up remains ambiguous in the context of the film as a whole, requiring us, the viewer, to piece together the chain of events into some coherent reality. Hence, The Wailing's development of uncertainty lies not in the visuals of the story, but rather in how the narrative is delivered and how we perceive it. And this is where the film becomes extremely interesting. Similarly as before, Jung-gu wakes up sweating and screaming from a dream, except this time we're actually shown the dream that precedes this scene. Jung-gu is chased by the red-eyed Japanese man covered in blood. Instead of asking what Jung-gu was dreaming about, now we're forced to ask a much more involved question. Where does the dream begin? This is a question I've asked myself ever since watching this film, a question I've come no closer to answering despite the longer I spend pondering it. You might say, well, the whole scene was a dream, except it isn't. Not only are the events leading up to the scene logical, coherent, and properly grounded in reality, but this scene dispels its classification as just a dream with one element: external interaction. When the woman leads Jung-gu through the house, he calls his partner, who talks to him over the phone from the hospital. Not only that, but the information gathered from this phone call is referenced by both Jung-gu's superior and his partner later on in the film. So at what point does the narrative transition from reality to a dream? Well, it's uncertain. This sense of detachment from reality is, of course, intentional. Many sequences within the Wailing blur the line between reality and dreams, between fact and fiction. Many scenes don't seem to display clear beginnings or ends, and instead blur together to produce an atmosphere that few films have ever successfully created, let alone attempted. The Wailing is very much reminiscent of classic films such as The Machinist, Memento, Nocturnal Animals, and even Inception. These movies all share a commonality. They each deliver their narratives with one goal in mind, generating a powerful sense of uncertainty in the viewer's mind. It's this uncertainty, this ambiguity upon which The Wailing builds its premise and by proxy its strong thematic undercurrent. How do we rationalize what is ambiguous? How do we make sense of what we do not understand? The Wailing reflects much of the historical tension between Korea and Japan, a product of Japan's 35-year-long rule over Korea between 1910 and 1945. That tension is readily apparent throughout every strata of the film. As rumors run rampant, the death toll increases, and the village erupts into chaos. The townspeople take very little time to pin one man as their prime suspect, the culprit for all the possessions and the murders, the Japanese man. While skeptical at first, Jung-gu soon allows himself to succumb to the mass xenophobia expressed by the village people. And as much as we, the audience, want to believe the Japanese man is innocent, Jung-gu's suspicions are seemingly confirmed when he visits the man's home and finds a strange, almost cult-like shrine, along with dozens of photographs of and items from all the possessed and the dead. Most damning of all, Jung-gu finds his daughter's shoe, and she too becomes terribly ill later on in the film. Everything we think we know about the story and its events seems to point toward the Japanese man's involvement in and perpetration of the crimes, but the twisted end of the film may allege otherwise, an end so ambiguous it seems it's left much of its audience thoroughly perplexed. The end of the film follows a young priest in training, a deacon, as he confronts the Japanese stranger in a cave deep within the forest. The priest demands the stranger reveal his true form. To which the Japanese man replies, The Japanese man then morphs into a terrifying form of the devil incarnate, a gruesome transformation that seemingly confirms he is indeed responsible for the plague that has possessed both the village and Jung-gu's daughter. It's this moment during which the uncertainty previously established by Jung-gu's strange dreams and their disruption of the narrative's reality play a critical role. Is the Japanese man truly turning into the devil right before the deacon? I don't think so. The deacon blindly followed his faith to search for the stranger, to confirm that he was truly the devil. And as the Japanese man puts it, he has become exactly what the priest expected to see, the devil. Faced with a chain of events he can't rationalize, and a man he not only fails to understand, but more importantly, fears, the deacon's perception of reality becomes distorted. Similar to the oddity of Jung-gu's experience, the deacon's subjective perspective of the events and the man before him blurs the line between fact and fiction, and the transformation he sees before him is simply a dream. Even more interesting, however, is the supposed revelation of the film, that both the Japanese man and the shaman have been working together to spread the plague across the village, and that the spirit, Mumyung, has been combating the pair all along. We're led to believe that she is the true force of good here. She tells Jung-gu that he has sinned by plotting to kill and must therefore go through a test of faith. She has planted a trap in his home for the devil, and it will only work if Jung-gu waits 3 rooster crows before going home. Of course, Jung-gu doesn't listen to her and runs home to find his possessed daughter has murdered both his wife and his mother. I think the interesting thing here is the film's emphasis on faith. If faith was what led the priest to misperceive the Japanese man as the devil, then should Jung-gu has placed his faith in Mumyung? Once again, the answer is uncertain. The Wailing doesn't make a clear delineation between good and evil. The Japanese man, the shaman, and the spirit are all ambiguous forces. They could lie on one side or the other, but it doesn't seem as though the film truly confirms a concrete representation of any one of them. And I think this is beautifully illustrated in the ways in which the film presents each of these characters, most notably the Japanese man. Scenes where Jong-gu, the deacon, or other characters are present often portray the man as a force of evil, presumably because the film is communicating how each of these characters perceive this man. It is only when he is alone that the film seems to give us what is potentially an unbiased perspective, a glimpse of a different man altogether, a scared, isolated, and frail individual desperately trying to fend for himself and survive. The Wailing is honestly brilliant. Its story is crafted in a way that allows us to experience the emotions, thoughts, and most important of all, the perspectives of its characters. It's a film that delivers its narrative in a way that expertly communicates the core of its themes. The human perspective is subjective, so much so that we may begin to blur the lines between reality and dreams as we turn toward other explanations and attempt to rationalize what we either can't comprehend or what we can't bring ourselves to face and understand. We see what we want to see when we're surrounded with uncertainty, and even when we've been given all the facts. So much so that we would rather remain content living in fictional illusion than dispel our irrational beliefs and face reality. So much so that an entire village, unable to comprehend the horrors of the plague they see before them, begin to turn to supernatural explanations, and their internal xenophobia pins what may very well be an innocent man as the devil incarnate. Is the Japanese man truly responsible for the murderous plague, and is the spirit a valiant force of good? Or is the village experiencing a natural, albeit horrifying phenomenon, and its people have turned toward the supernatural for an explanation? Who knows? The Wailing asks a critical question. When you can't rationalize the world around you, when everything is uncertain, what do you do? Who do you turn to? And what or who do you believe? The beauty of The Wailing lies in its ability to suggest so many possible explanations and yet confirm none of them, to enable you to share the unnerving and horrifying uncertainty experienced by the characters of its story, to distort your reality and leave you pondering the truth. So I ask you, is any of this real?